it made me feel like I really could go out into the world and be whoever I was. You know, I could be myself. I could be out as a dyke, out as a lesbian, out on stage. I could be creative. I could be critical. I had critical thinking. And I had confidence because I had been supported in being who I was and believing the way I believed. And I knew that I wasn't alone. And I think that has fortified me to go out and do what I've done in the world. Basically, I'm Phranc, with the PH and a hard C, your basic, average, all-American Jewish lesbian folk singer.
I respect you. I really appreciate the things you do. I like you.
I pretty much knew I was a dyke from maybe before kindergarten, and I made it all the way through elementary school. I suffered through a little bit of junior high, and by the time I got to high school, I just couldn't stand it anymore. I dropped out of high school and I left home to become a lesbian. I grew up in the women's community, specifically in the lesbian feminist community of West Los Angeles, and then I was fortunate enough to find the women artists and the community at the Women's Building. First I came to the Women's Building and I liked it because it was a place for me to play my guitar. And I played on the boardwalk, I'm a folk singer, and I wrote my own music, and there weren't too many places to play. I would play on the boardwalk in Venice. And then I found out about Dorothy Baker's Coffee House at the Women's Building on Grandview. And I would go to Dorothy Baker's Coffee House that had an open mic with my guitar, and I would sing at Dorothy Baker's Coffee House. How old was I? I was 17 when the building moved. I remember my 18th birthday, Cheryl took me to the Women's Saloon for my 18th birthday, which was where I had my first concert ever. My first real concert was at the L.A. Women's Saloon on Fountain. A lot of people came to the Women's Building because they wanted more education, and they were feminist, and they were into, I was a junior dyke. I didn't really, I was just a teenager. I was not real dedicated to education, to put it mildly. I wanted to have a good time. But I loved the lesbian community, and I loved art, and I loved women. And so it was a perfect place for me to be, because what they really did is they nurtured me, the community nurtured me, and I was really focused on my music. I was doing some visual art. I came to work in the Women's Graphic Center with Cindy Marsh as her apprentice, and I learned how to silkscreen and use the offset press, and that was like my main job that I did. But what I really focused on creatively at the building was my music. All I wanted to do was be in a punk band, and the only people that I knew in LA were lesbians. So there weren't any lesbians in punk bands then. There was two separate worlds. I could not see why the punks and the feminists could not get along, because basically we had all this mutual same enemies. Everybody, all the same people hated us. The right wing's conservative. Everybody had an idea of what we were. The feminists were men-hating, and the punks were all Nazis. But I wanted to be in a band really bad, so I'd get dressed up, and I'd put on my little suit and tie, and I'd go out to the clubs, and I'd just stand there, try to look cool. And I swear to God that somebody came up to me and asked me if I said, "Hey, you want to be in our band?" I said, I didn't know if I could play anything or do anything. I was just standing there trying to look cool, and I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Good, because the name's Nervous Gender." I was like perfect. I looked like a 12-year-old boy. Hair was part on the side, and I had a little suit on, a little tie. And I was just hanging by the skin of my teeth. I didn't know anybody. And they once again, I just got swept up into this community. And Nervous Gender, I have to say, was an incredibly misogynist band. So, with my great lesbian feminist background, I was singing songs that you would not even believe. Because I wasn't really part of the creative process. I was part of the image of this band. So it was 3 gay men and me. I could only be a Nervous Gender for so long. Then I was in a band called, at one point I was in 3 bands at the same time. I was in Nervous Gender, Catholic Discipline, which is in the movie The Decline of Western Civilization, and another little-known band, Castration Squad. At that time, which was about 79. It was 79. The punk community that I was in, people were wearing swastikas just to piss people off. and make old people angry for whatever reason. And being a Jew, it really pissed me off that people were wearing them. So I wrote a song called "Take Off Your Swastika." You know, the only difference between punk rock and folk music is volume and speed, you know. So if you slow down punk rock and you lower the volume a little bit, it tells the story. It's incredibly political. It's really articulate. It carries a message. It's folk music. It's music of the people. So I decided I was going to play "Take Off Your Swastika" on acoustic guitar so you could hear the words. Well, at that time it was unheard of. There was no unplugged. There was no, folk night. And I performed it at the Whiskey and at Club 88 and at the punk rock clubs where all the bands would play because that was my community. And you know what? They listened.
Take off your swastika, it's making me angry. Take off your swastika, it really nauseates me. You say, Phranc, it's just a symbol, it's just an emblem, it's just a righteous decoration. What it means, a little more to me.
So me and Rick Van Satten, all of us Sholem, he and I put together these folk nights at the Whiskey. And it was a hootenanny. It was all these punk rock acts playing acoustically for the first time ever. So the Circle Jerks played "He's Got the Whole World in His Hands." And John and Exene did Jackson. So that was really the beginning of the whole acoustic thing within the punk rock. It was way before Green Day. It was this was, maybe it was 80, 81. I played all the clubs around town, and in 1985, I wanted to make a record, and Craig Lee from the Bags and Ethan James, who own Little Tokyo Studios on Radio Tokyo Studios in Venice, said I saved my money from teaching swimming because I had got myself a little bit together. I had saved like $1,200, and I went into the studio and I made the record Folksinger. And when I finished it, Rhino Records, Gary Stewart from Rhino Records, who had come to all my shows and was a big fan, he said, "We'd love to put your record out." And that was kind of the beginning of, my life just kind of took off. That record came out. I started touring around the country. Then I went over to England. The record came out in England, and then I started kind of touring around the world. And that I put out 3 records. And then I was on Island Records, and my career kind of took off. Being a parent is just wild, and at school, at the kids' school, they have us do this sit circle, and you have to say about, what's the biggest surprise about being a parent? And I have to say, still for me, the biggest surprise about being a parent is that I'm the parent. It takes a very conscious decision to step out of someone else's way and let them be who they are. And it's really hard sometimes because they don't always make the choices that you want them to make or the choices that you think that they should make, but they make their own choices. And as they grow up, they make more and more of their own choices. And it's amazing to watch somebody grow up, but it's an amazing experience being a parent. Well, I still am Phranc, the All-American Jewish lesbian folk singer, and I am, now that the children are a little bit bigger, I'm starting to tour again and relaunching my musical career, so I will be out on a stage near you someday soon. And I also am the cardboard cobbler. I have a wonderful career as a visual artist, creating objects, items out of found cardboard and paper. I'm also have kind of the Phranc of California boutique line. A lot of the objects that I make are clothing, and a lot of it is very nostalgic. I am a water safety instructor. That is another one of my little jobs. I teach swimming and water safety, and here's a miniature version of my life jacket. But all of my items are made of paper and cardboard, and I do have a whole swimming line of Phranc of California bathing suits and life jackets. But of course, if you wore your paper life jacket in the water, it would not save your life. what I think is missing in the world today is the women's building. We don't have a feminist institution anymore to educate women and girls about our culture. And we do not have an institution like the women's building that creates that incubation that is so important. It's like missing. Because we all came from that, I think if you look, and you probably know from the interviews that you've done, at all the women that came from the women's building and where they've gone in the world, there is like shooting stars. Because I think that almost everybody that was there has gone on to make a tremendous impact in the world at large.
I respect you. I really appreciate the things you do. I like you.